Hi, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. I'm Tim Andersen, the Appraiser's Advocate, and we're here with our guest today, Greg Morley. Now, you've probably seen Craig. Hi, Craig. You've probably seen Craig here. I know you have. You've probably seen him at national conventions. Craig is an appraiser. He's state certified general in 3 states. He used to be on the ASB. He used to chair the Realtors Appraisal Board or Appraisal Committee. He used to be the president of the National Association of Appraisers, but he is here today simply as Craig, a friend of appraisal. So when we talk about what it is we're going to talk about, remember, you're getting the opinion of a man who has been around for a long time, who has national reach, national scope, but he's just talking from the standpoint of Craig. And if you believe him, wonderful. If you don't believe him, well, okay, that's wonderful too. We might question your sanity, but that's perfectly okay. So, Craig, well, we don't script these things. We do have some talking points. And one of the first talking points that we were looking at was we have chatted in the past at length relative to the changes that we know are coming in 2026. Now, obviously, nobody can predict the future, but we know certain things are going to be happening in 2026, especially when it comes to UAD 3.6. And even though we know what's happening, I'm sure there are going to be unforeseen bumps in this road. So let's talk about what's going to happen in 2026 relative to UAD 3.6. And we'll look at some other ancillary matters in a minute. But Craig, go ahead. From your 30,000 foot view of things, go ahead and give us an indication of what you think is going to happen.
Well, I think you've identified at least some of the problem is that it's going to take a little while to fully integrate 3.6 into a normal workflow. I understand that one appraisal has been completed and submitted to the GSEs using 3.6. We've only got, I think, two software vendors that have been approved by the GSEs to deliver appraisals in the 3.6 data format. SFREP, I understand, has a, I don't know if you'd call it a beta version, but they've at least got a working version of it out there. And then you've got Avery, which is kind of a startup that has their system out. I'm told, and I think this is correct, is that the appraisal that was delivered was using the SFREP. And so we expect that you're not going to see a complete adoption. And part of the thing to keep in mind is that not only is the software for appraisers a little slower getting rolled out than what I think the GSEs thought it might be, but the lenders have a fairly expensive software rewrite that they have to go through to be able to not only receive the appraisals, but deliver their information using the new data format to the GSEs. And the lender has to have their process approved by the GSEs before they can deliver the appraisals. And so I think realistically, I've talked with most of the software vendors. Most of them are getting close. I think the issue that you're going to have is that even once they get approved through the GSEs, it's going to take a little while to work out the bugs. I think with Bradford and with Total, which is now Totality, and as you start looking at uh, oh, Andy Arledge has his Freedom Appraise software that he's very close on, as well as ACI, that all of them are still working through. Even those that have the approved software don't have the mobile applications for the data collection completed. And so there's still a lot of work going on to try to get these things done. I think it's important to keep in mind that there's two fundamental philosophical uh, approaches to designing the software for the UAD 3.6 that appraisers are going to need to keep in mind. First of all, is you're going to have to realize it's going to take a while to roll out 3.6. The data format between 2.6 and 3.6 are not compatible with each other. And so what software provider am I going to use that's going to be able to provide both 2.6 and 3.6 until 3.6 is fully adopted? And I think realistically, that's not going to happen until the end of 2026. And so, am I going to have to buy two subscriptions to software providers so that I can continue to deliver things in our more traditional 2.6 data format and then have a separate provider for 3.6? Or am I going to use a provider that can do both? And at this point, Avery is only a 3.6 provider. My understanding is they're going to be charging on a per report basis. It looks like it's incorporated a good deal of automation into the system. And I think it will be a pretty effective system from what I can tell. But there are some questions about the work file, the flexibility of the appraiser to be able to manipulate the results from the analytics. And I think it's important to realize for appraisers that regardless of what kind of analytical tools we're using, the opinions and conclusions need to be our own. And so we can't just plug stuff into a black box, have it kick out results, and uniformly accept that as our opinion of value. We need to understand how the system is developing the adjustments. They've got to make sense to you. And those opinions and conclusions need to be your own. And you need to be able to comply with the work file requirements under USPAP. And so as your whatever software you are selecting, you've got to make sure that it allows you the flexibility to develop these results in compliance with USPAP, and I think most of them will. But there are some questions as we start having some of these providers that do much of the background analytics, making sure that you understand what's happening in the background and that they represent your opinions and conclusions and not some AI bots analytics based on data where you have no idea how those numbers were developed. But aside from that, the fundamentals are that you've basically got the desktop type software where I get a desktop version of the software that resides on my computer, and then I use that software to generate the reports and submit them. And then you've got the cloud-based software that where everything resides in a cloud and or on the web, and you log in and do the work there. And as I understand it, SFREP and total or totality are pretty much desktop applications. I believe Bradford is going to have retain their desktop application for 2.6, but have moved to they've kind of reimagined how this would work in a cloud-based or web-based system, as I believe ACI has tried to move that same direction. And Andy Artledge, with his Freedom software, has his developed so that it does both 2.6 and 3.6, along with the analytics that will all be cloud based. And I think from a practical standpoint, the advantage that you've got is that on a cloud-based system, you aren't married to a uh, particular operating system or a device. And for me personally, I'm looking forward to getting a system where I can make revisions, I can do all of the information on my phone, my iPad, my desktop, whatever I have. I can log into my account and do the work. And I think that that is, for me, going to be the best system for my operation. And I think for those of you that have assistants that you're trying to have help collect some of the county record data, build your files, set things up, I think the cloud-based system is a little easier because you're not trying to copy files back and forth or have someone log in or do a remote desktop login and those elements for the cloud. You don't really have to deal with those kinds of problems. And so, though fundamentally, those are the things that are trying to be resolved. And frankly, no one has a complete operating system with where you can collect all the data out in the field, you can get all your sketching, and then upload it into the software and deliver the report. That is going to take a little while. And as I've talked with many of the vendors, uh, probably mid-January, I think, is what most of them are believing. They'll be out of their beta and be to the point where it will be a fully functioning operation. And as I understand it, I think there's only one or two lenders that are even approved through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac right now to be able to deliver loans. And so the rollout is taking longer than what the GSEs thought it would. And the software is, just the data format is more complicated than I think most appreciate or understand. And I think you're going to discover that the amount of information that needs to be obtained is greater. And so it's going to take a little while to get used to the system and what data points need to be collected and to be analyzed and used in the appraisal.
Craig, you just mentioned lenders. Now, we've talked about the GSEs, we've talked about the software vendors, we've talked about appraisers, but nobody is paying any attention to the impact this will have on lenders. Now, let's suppose, and again, this is hypothetical because I don't know. Let's suppose that it's 6 months from now, and you have gotten whatever, I don't know which software you use, but it's the 3.6 version, and you're happily appraising away, and you get a call from a lender, and the lender basically says, well, you got to do it on the old format because we haven't transitioned. Now, my question is not specifically that, but we haven't heard from the lending community. What if 6 months down the road, the lending community uh, picks up the phone, calls Freddie, calls Fannie, and says, guys, this just is not working. There are too many glitches in the system. Appraisals are taking longer than they were. We're having to send them back 4 or 5 times because appraisers are not familiar with the system. So, you guys want our business? Great. We want your money. But you guys want our business? We got to go back to what we were doing before, or you got to do something else because this UAD stuff is simply not working for us. Do you see that as a potential, or should I move that to number 817 on my to worry about list?
Well, and I obviously don't know the answer, but I think what I envision happening, I think the GSEs are fully committed to 3.6. And right or wrong, I don't think there's any possibility that they're going to change. The only thing I could see maybe happening is that full adoption could get pushed out a little bit further to allow adoption by some of the, by the lending community, and that assumes that they're unable to get their get their processes to where it's compliant. It is, from what I understand, it's been a workout to get some of that to happen. And what I do see though, Tim, is if I'm a small community lender or a credit union who doesn't do a lot of GSE loans, I do my home equity loans, I do my business and personal loans, my auto loans, but I'm not really doing a lot of the loans, originating loans that I'm sending to the GSEs. I think those are the ones that are probably going to drop out of the home loan business, or they will have to affiliate with either an AMC or with a larger lender to be able to facilitate the process, because I expect that it's going to be expensive and hard enough for that lender to be able to make all of the changes and get approved, to where it just, from a financial standpoint, it's hard for me to think that that's going to make sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see some of your smaller community lenders either drop out or have to affiliate to be able to continue providing those financial services to their customer base.
Okay, now let's continue forward with this for a minute. So, First Oak Tree Bank calls you up and says, Craig, y'all have done good work for us. Of course, in Southern Utah, they don't say y'all, but I don't live in Southern Utah. So they say, y'all have done good work for us, but we're cutting way back because we're not big enough to make this transition. So since we don't need appraisals for cars and we don't need appraisals for business loans and stuff like that, we're not going to be giving you any work. And we're not mad at you. You've done good stuff. It's just that those aren't the kind of loans we're going to make anymore. Now, how is this going to impact, or excuse me, let me rephrase. How is this, if at all, going to impact the boots on the ground appraiser from a standpoint of the amount of work that is coming in, because there are potentially fewer lenders seeking and funding mortgage loans?
Well, I think, from my perspective, the first thing I'm going to do is go talk to these guys and see if they're doing home equity loans or other things. Now, unfortunately, because of the way that the lending laws have been established, is they don't really need appraisals for many of these home equity loans. But I would certainly go in and try to convince them that it's prudent to get an appraisal, and I can even revise and provide a scope of work that would be a little less challenging or time consuming, that would allow me to provide some of these valuation services. In some of the states, including Utah, we went in and made it to where appraisers could do the evaluations, which, the lender needs to have some kind of valuation in their file. And so I could actually provide an evaluation or some kind of a restricted use appraisal, something that would allow me to retain at least some of the work that these lenders might have available. I think it's important to realize that the scope of work is not the same for every lending situation. And so we just ought to try to make our services available, even if they're not selling the loans in the secondary market, to where we can do that. I think, it's hard to know if the loan value volume is going to remain the same. I think as rates creep down, that we'll hopefully see a little bit of increase. I'd mentioned to you that I'd seen an online forum mention where some loan officers at Wells Fargo had gotten creative and figured out ways to manipulate loan packages to where they would qualify for an evaluation and skip the appraisal process. I can't imagine that there's only one loan officer who's bright enough to figure that out. And so I think the GSEs are going to have to be keeping an eye on whether or not the loan package really ought to have an appraisal waiver. And hopefully we'll see a continuation of need for our valuation services. And with the amount of effort that has gone into developing 3.6, I think there's still going to be demand for it. I suspect what may happen, though, is it might start getting pushed to more of the larger lenders. And I don't know, for me, that's unfortunate. I think a viable community lending program is always good for the community and for the consumer. But uh, if you don't have a good relationship with some of these larger lenders, it may just mean that the work product's going to their appraisal panel. And if you're not on it, then you're probably not going to see the work. But it's there. There will certainly be some adjustments and reallocations on how some of this stuff is being done, and we are noticing a push to try to hire staff appraisers throughout a lot of these AMCs or large national appraisal firms to try to provide the valuation services, and so the independent appraiser may find themselves having a difficult time competing on that level. Of course, we can't talk about fees, but you got to expect that it's probably going to take a little more time, certainly at the initial outset, but even over time, the 3.6 is going to be a little more involved than it has been in the past. And so you're going to have to take a serious look at how much is my time worth, and how do I make sure my compensation appropriately accounts for the cost of providing and doing business in a new data environment.
Now, Craig, you just opened the door for the next question. From a standpoint of efficiency, and apparently appraisers are going to have to become more efficient. What about the need for modern data collection equipment and protocols? Now, obviously, we don't take our Kodaks there and click a picture and it shoots out the bottom. And then we take three pictures because they're going to be three copies of the report. And we don't glue them in the report anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, nobody has a digital camera. They got their phone. But there are still appraisers out there who swear by their 300-foot plastic tapes, their fiberglass tapes, and their clipboards and a legal pad. Okay. Now, I'm not saying, and please, anybody listening, don't interpret that as I'm saying that's somehow wrong or unethical. But given, Craig, what you just said, are we going to have to become more efficient? And if we must become more efficient, what will that increase in efficiency look like, and what will it accomplish?
Well, if we don't become more efficient, it's going to take more time. That's really just kind of the bottom line. And if you want to, that there is certainly a press to lenders, and consumers don't want to pay more for valuation services, as you would expect. The new data format is going to require more data points, and it's going to be a little more, it's just more information. So either it's going to take longer, or we're going to have to become more efficient in figuring out how to collect all of the information that's required. And if we are not efficient and it's taking much longer to provide the appraisal, either we're making less per assignment, or uh, we just will drop out of performing those kinds of valuation services. And so for some appraisers, that's all they do. It will be a problem. There are some really good, mobile tools out there. And as the software providers complete the mobile data collection tools, you're going to find that it will actually become easier to get some of this information collected than what it has been in the past. Andy Artledge, with his Freedom Appraisal, I was watching a demo that he has. And Tim, if you want, I can send you the link. So if any of you have an interest, you could kind of look at how he imagines this working. But they've developed a new data collection tool that it's going to require a device with LiDAR, which at this point, the only devices that have LiDAR are Apple products, your Apple Pro products, or pretty much it. You can get the tablet or the iPhone. I ended up buying the iPad Pro, the latest with their new chip and all that stuff. And I like the tablet; it's great. The only problem, Apple in their wisdom removed the wide angle lens on the camera. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. Everything we do at least requires a wide enough angle to be able to capture the information on it, which, kind of frustrating. But I bought a little device that I can clip on there that gives me the wide angle, or I can use my iPhone, which has a wider angle. And then I just have everything upload to Google Photos, so within a few minutes it's there, and I can copy and paste them in the report. But the thing that he's got with his mobile sketcher is that you can go in and scan each of the rooms, and the software will, it's remarkable. It will measure the ceiling height, it will give you the air window areas, it will calculate all of that. And as long as you go through and measure the width of the exterior walls, it will then calculate. So you go through and scan each room, it will piece this together in a 3D model and then generate a ANSI compliant sketch with a lot more detail than I think most of us are accustomed to seeing. But it will provide a lot of that data that we need for the new 3.6 uh, data standard. And I think that you're going to find, I had looked at Total's data collection tool, and it's not operational at this point. But if I go in and use their uh, mobile sketcher, and they've got one that's not too bad. I've used it a time or two, but it's a little glitchy. But if something that we have to be aware of is ceiling height. The elevation of the front threshold from the finished grade is something we're going to need to report. And there's a lot more granular information that we're just not used to collecting that if I'm using one of these scan tools may collect for me and help me make sure I'm not forgetting things. On a deck, I'm going to need to report the size, and if I scan that with the total tool, and I think with the freedom tool as well, it will then prompt me to provide the other information that it needs so I don't forget anything. If I'm out here with my clipboard, then I've got to remember to write down, I've got to measure it, I've got to identify the materials that it's built out of, and then I need to be able to give a condition rating on it. And so there's just lots of things that you're going to have to remember. And as you become more familiar with collecting the information, it will become more intuitive on what you need to have. But it's not going to be easy. And I think, again, with Total, they've got some access to public record data. I know that Andy's got a national MLS connection in addition to all of the national data so that I can type in an address and it will go pull in the public record data. If it will pull the MLS data, it will show you the differences between them. And then you can select what you think is the most reliable. It's got a comp ranking system to where you go in and select the boundaries for and the criteria, and then either using your MLS or the national MLS data, it will then rank it based on the characteristics of the subject, and you can select what you think is most similar, and then provide some of the analytics. And again, it's using multiple tools from depreciated replacement cost, statistical analysis of the adjustments to where you'll be able to then go in and say, I think these adjustments make the most sense. And then you'll have full complete workup in your work file. Now it's some of the software providers are saying we're not going to do that. We're going to let you to get the third party add-ons, and then you can go in and do your own analytics. Our software will generate the report, but you need to provide your own supporting documentation. And if you're comfortable with the way that you've been doing it and feel good about the adjustments that you're providing, then that's going to work just fine. But I think that you're going to start having a lot of appraisers who've been married to a software system that are going to have to take a serious look at, is this going to have all of the tools that I need to become as efficient as possible and be able to maintain a comfortable or a reasonable compensation based on the fees I'm able to get. And automation is one of the ways that's going to help me to be able to collect and write these reports a little more efficiently.
Okay, let's talk about automation. Let's talk about AI. Now, we've spoken about efficiency. We've spoken about efficiency in the context of uh, getting the report out faster, but not cutting corners. Okay, so we've got artificial intelligence. In 18 months, it has become basically, it was just a relatively poor replacement for Google to the point where now it's practically, and let me stress practically, sentient. So we throw a bunch of data, we put a bunch of data in an Excel chart and we download the Excel chart to whatever large language model that floats our boat. And we say, okay, tell me about this property and give me a reasonable idea of what it was worth on August 18th, 2025. And it does. Now, we're not getting into how reliable that is yet. We will. But let's assume it's reliable. Okay, let's assume there were enough data that we really don't have to worry about individual. Let's suppose it's a cookie cutter house in a cookie cutter subdivision in Orange County, California. The subdivision has 5,000 houses. They got four floor plans, and 350 to 400 of them sell every year. And you download all that data into Excel, and AI or Gronk or Gemini or whatever it is crunches it and says, "Oh yeah, this house ought to be worth around $875,000." And you go, "Oh, that's lovely." So you pull out your appraisal restricted report form. And by the way, go ahead and plug yours if you want to. Pull out your restricted reporting form for an appraisal, and you say, "Okay, AI, do your thing. Fill it in and send it out along with an invoice, and go ahead and apply my signature, which I've already saved to the memory." So it goes, "Okay," and then you go to play pickleball because you know that it's going to go out the door and an invoice is going to get sent and everything is going to be absolutely lovely. Then there's the house in the panhandle of Idaho, uh, Hollywood money, 25,000 square feet, custom design, custom built, custom finished. It's got a movie studio and a bowling alley for crying out loud. It's on 500 acres and it's off the grid. Okay, now obviously AI isn't going to work there. Okay, that's going to require boots on the ground. That's going to require absolute intellectual effort. Now, let's compare the two. One, the appraiser just entered data. Maybe the appraiser even took pictures, but the appraiser just entered data and the computer did the rest of it. In the other one, the appraiser had to spend the night in the nearest town because it took 2 days to measure it and photograph it and make all the notes, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of questions. Talking about AI, in the two situations that I've set up, will AI work and not work? Uh, why? And if it won't work, what is the appraiser going to do? And if it does work, how far away are we from having AI appraise the second one as well as the first one?
Well, the technology is changing so quickly that it's whatever its capabilities are today, it's going to change and become better as time goes on. There's no question about that. Right now, ChatGPT's got their 5.1 out, and it's getting better as time goes on. Last year, I was doing an estate that had properties in Arizona. I was doing a commercial building, and I was using the AI. This was a restricted report, and I was using it to collect some of the neighborhood information and, basic trends. And it was coming back with some pretty useful results. I thought, wow, this is pretty nice. I wonder if I go in and ask the AI to it's a public, it's a reporting state. The sales information's on the public record. Go search the public records and come back with I need 5 comparable sales of industrial buildings between this and that in size and this and that in use, and would like it within a 5 or 6 mile radius of a particular address. And I'm so I'm kind of interested to see what it's going to do. And I'll be darned, it comes back with some amazing data. I'm going, this is awesome. And I had asked when I got it, I says, I want the street address, I want the tax ID number, I want the physical characteristics, and it gives me all of this in this great looking table. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is, life has changed. And then I go into the public records to verify it, and I can't find anything. I'm going, what's wrong with this thing? So I asked the AI, I go, are these actual sales? He goes, oh no, these are just illustrative. I go, well, that doesn't help me very much, And so I quickly realized that, boy, you better double check everything to make sure that what you're getting is what you think it is. And then I went into the MLS, took data, put it in, and had it rank, based on physical characteristics. When I did that, I actually ended up with better results. But what I found was that you have to be careful. You can't, I find most of the time I have to revise questions multiple times to get something that is useful for what I'm trying to do, but it can be an exceptionally useful tool. And the first scenario that you've outlined is certainly possible to do. I think for me personally, I have pretty well moved away from using the general purpose forms for most of the non-lender work that we're doing, because I have developed just a short little narrative outline for either a restricted appraisal or an appraisal report that I can do it just as fast as filling out the form by uploading public record data, the letter of engagement, some of the information, and then have it go in and write the basic elements of the report pretty quickly, and it's nice. And I find that a lot of lenders, or not lenders, clients, when they get it, it's a more user friendly, easier to read kind of an analysis and report, and so I've liked it. The general purpose form has its place, and I think even in some cases, putting your sales in the adjustment grid and adjusting it out, and then copying and pasting that into the report is a useful tool as well, to where you get to end up with a hybrid. But I think that as you get into the more complex assignments, uh, you, the AI still can be an exceptionally useful tool in helping to analyze and to write and to provide elements of the report, but its ability to do the whole thing is still not that great right now. And what I'm even finding is that while the tools can be very useful, giving multiple assignments, for example, I want you to write my transmittal letter, an executive summary, a scope of work overview, definitions of value, all of the stuff. Well, I usually label it pertinent information, or whatever, how you label it in your report, and try to have it go through and then upload a bunch of sales and have it write the report based on all the information that I've uploaded. Doesn't do a very good job of that now. But if I take it piece by piece, section by section, does a really good job. And so I think, I've tried to have it go through and put together a good certification and contingent or extraordinary assumptions, and some of the other elements that you put into report. And I find it works a lot better if I have an already existing uh, certification, assumptions, and limiting conditions, and say, I need to have just rewrite for this assignment, does a pretty good job. If I don't have that, doesn't do that good a job. It's missing some of the required elements in your certification. So I think from a practical standpoint, you still have to understand what the appraisal needs to look like. You've got to have a working understanding of all of the pieces that go into the appraisal. But if you do that and use it as a tool for writing and to help with some of the analytics, it's pretty good right now. And it would be pretty good in both scenarios. And being able to go in and provide some of the additional supporting information, it can be very helpful. You just have to make sure that you know what the answers need to look like so that you're not relying solely on the results, and you need to double check the information because it is not always 100% correct.
Yeah, especially when it makes the stuff up.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. I'm
although
giving you some illustrative information here, which
it's
looks
all
really
fake,
good.
but it sure sounds good, doesn't it? All
Yeah,
right,
it does.
Craig, as we wrap this up, let me ask you another question about AI. Now, you and I, full disclosure, you and I both like it. We both use it a lot in what we do. Now, okay, you're in Arizona. You're doing an appraisal in Arizona, which is a full disclosure state. And you got public record data and MLS data, and you don't have any trouble getting data. And you have other data sources which you download and incorporate into your spreadsheet. And you're really happy. And you tell the computer to write the appraisal report. Oh, and it does. And you're happy with it. Now, you've gone through it, and while you might have said something differently, there was nothing wrong with the way AI phrased it. And you might have thrown a little bit more in here, but there's nothing wrong with what AI did. So you go, oh, okay, fine. And you sign it and send it out. Now, you entered the data, you had to put in the filters, you had to read through it and approve it. You had every right to edit out what you didn't like or edit in what you thought the report was missing. But the machine wrote the report. Now, you signed the certification, specifically, this is my work. The standard rule 2-3 uses the term my work. And it says everything in here is true and correct. And you know it's true and correct, at least you hope you do, because according to standard rule 1-4, it's up to the appraiser to collect, verify, and analyze all information necessary for credible assignment results. And you never picked up the phone. You never chatted with anybody. Granted, you pulled stuff out of MLS, and you have the right to assume that's correct, unless you just know otherwise. Um, you have the right to assume that the county public record is correct. But in this scenario that I've set up, have you plagiarized the report, or is it nothing more than like the president has speechwriters? John Kennedy, which ages both of us, gave his speech about he ended his inaugural speech with "Ask not what you can do, what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And everybody said, "Oh, it's a wonderful speech. Kennedy really nailed it." But Kennedy admitted it was written by his speechwriter, Ted Sorensen, who was his friend from college, friend from Harvard back in the 30s. And Ted Sorensen admitted he got it from a professor of political science who took it from a Greek philosopher. But yet everybody says, "Oh, that was an absolutely fabulous speech by Kennedy," as if he was sitting around when I go, "Oh, okay, I got a great ending." And no, not only did he not come up with it, he didn't even write it. Knew who wrote it, stole it from a professor who got it from a Greek philosopher. Now, nobody says Kennedy plagiarized that speech. So when we do AI, have we plagiarized anything? Or are we completely in the clear, signing that certification that it's my work and everything in it is true and correct, just so we can go meet our pickleball appointment?
I'm obviously not a legal expert when it comes to plagiarization, but I believe my understanding of how this works is because you're the one in control, you're the one directing, and I know for me personally, when I'm using AI to help, I have to have it rewrite stuff all the time because there's issues with something that they say, no, that's not exactly right. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And if I'm in control, I'm the one that is directing the results, and the results are my own opinion based on a tool that I've used, then I don't believe that there's any plagiarization that's taken place. I believe that it is your unique individual work because I'm the one who initiated and directed and concurred with the results in the final format. And you certainly have. I mean, the way I normally do it is I copy and paste it into a Word document or some editing software, where then I still go in and make a few edits to get it exactly the way I think it ought to be to reflect my personal opinions and conclusions. So I think in that scenario, I don't think that's a problem. I think where you run, I think it may be appropriate and to go in your assumptions and limiting conditions to indicate that I used AI as a editing and tool in developing some of the report. I that's probably a best practice, putting something like that in the report. So if anybody came back in and asked about it, I've credited my tool as something that was used in writing the report. But beyond that, I don't see a serious problem with it at this point.
Okay. Greg, thank you. I appreciate it. And before we say goodbye to everybody, is there anything else on your plate that we need to know about?
It's always just a pleasure to be with you, Tim, and to be able to talk about some of these upcoming issues. I think over the next little while, you're going to see a lot of appraisers having to make some decisions on how you're going to adjust your workflow to be able to incorporate some of these things. And now's a really good time to get some education, start experimenting. I think a lot of these software providers are providing demonstration or free use so that you can become familiar with the applications. And I think that I see a lot of negative comments about 3.6, and anytime we have change, I don't think as a group of people we like seeing change, but I think in the end it's probably going to be an upgrade from what we've had in the past. It's just going to take a little while to get used to it, and if it forces us to become a little more tech savvy, I don't think that's a bad thing. The world is changing, and I remember the first time I tried to do a sketch on a mobile device, and I about, you know, threw the device in the weeds and left it there because it was so frustrating trying to, I know what I want it to do. I just can't figure out how to make it happen. And then once I become familiar with it, it's like, man, why was I doing this any other way? And there are just so many little things that we can do, but it requires an investment of time. And if we're willing to do that, invest in ourselves and our career and learn how to use the tools, I think it's going to be, I think we're going to come away in a year or two from now thinking that this is not as bad as we thought it was.
Craig, just so everybody knows, please, what is your email address?
My email address is valupro@gmail.com. There's no E in value because somebody stole that before I had a chance to get it on Gmail, but it's valupro@gmail.com. And if
Yeah,
if there's
we'll have it
anything
on.
that, yeah, and if anybody wants to see kind of a template on a narrative type uh, report, if you're trying to transition away from the forms and use a little more a different reporting format, I'll send you a copy of what we're using, and then you can kind of decide. I mean, it's only an outline. You're going to have to go in and change it to meet the property and the circumstances, but it gives you some ideas on what needs to be in the report to check all the boxes from a reporting standpoint.
Yeah, I've seen, Craig, what you've done, and I gladly recommend it. So, Craig, let's see. Do you have any speaking engagements coming up in the near future?
Not really, but I know that maybe one time or sometime down the road, Jeff, my son, is in the process of going through and demoing each of the software platforms. And we're trying as a company, and with some of the involvement that he has, uh, to determine what is going to be the ultimate solution for report writing. And I think once that's been done, it may be kind of fun to get him on, and we can talk a little bit about the pros and cons on some of these different systems. In fact, if any of you listening think that that's something you'd be interested in, write a comment to Tim and put it, and then we'll see if we can't make something like that happen if there's enough interest in that.
Have you got Jeff's email handy?
Uh, Jeff, Jeff at sutap.com.
Jeff, Jeff at sutap.com. All right, yeah, we'll have that. We'll have that in the background, so folks can see it. And then, uh, Craig is sitting here in his office recording this with me. Jeff is in the next office, probably recording market moves with Mark and Jeff. So there is a lot of podcasting takes place out of Craig's office. So
Well, and Jeff and Mark are addressing a lot of the contemporary issues. If it's one of those things that wouldn't hurt you to go in and subscribe to their podcast, because they're talking with a lot of the top players in the market, GSE members and so forth, that they've got a pretty good handle on what's going on with some of the players in the market.
okay, all right, that's market moves with Mark and Jeff. All right, Craig, thank you. I appreciate your time, appreciate your wisdom, appreciate your loquacity. Thank you very thoughtfully. And my wife and I look forward to the next time we get together with you and your wife. And until then, be safe and well. And it's always a pleasure, Craig. Thank
Well,
you.
Florida's sounding really good about February, so we may have to
Yeah,
be making a trip.
yeah.
So,
As we record this, it's about 82 degrees. There's a little breeze out of the southeast. It's about 60% humidity, which for you is absolutely dripping wet, but for us is
yes,
dry.
yes.
And a few clouds in the sky, but just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, Saturday I was up in the mountains, so we've got a little place up in a ski resort that's at 9,800 feet, which is like no air, and had to shovel snow off the deck, and about died. And so there is a little difference. Of course, down in the valley it's not too bad, but boy, up in the mountains it's cold and snowy, and the way the mountains are supposed to be.
All right. Well, Craig, very good. We shall be in touch, sir. Thanks. Bye
All
now.
right. Thanks, Tim.